Jonathan, is it rolling? Okay, great. Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's get into it, guys. Yeah, today I would say is one of the most important topics that we discussed so far. It's already a part of a lot of what we do. It's just going to be a matter of kind of make it more explicit and place greater emphasis on it. So let's take a look at what we got today. So we're going to be discussing differential reinforcement. So today we're going to be looking at DRA, DRI, and FCT. And I promise those acronyms are going to mean something to you by the time we're done. Because I do recognize that with this field, there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of words that are just condensed into these very tight letters. They can be very confusing, especially all the differential reinforcement procedures. But let's take it one step at a time. Okay, we always start off with definitions. So what is differential reinforcement? It's combining two principles that we've already discussed so far. We're looking at reinforcing desired behaviors, the target behaviors that we would like the clients to engage more, whether that be communication, cooperation, completing ADLs, all that fun stuff. We want to reinforce that. Conversely, we also want to place on extinction to extinguish those behaviors that get in the way of them learning and living meaningful lives. So problem behavior, thing we were discussing just yesterday, form of aggression, SID, priority distraction, all that. So differential reinforcing is simply the application of both reinforcement and extinction simultaneously. Yeah, just as I was discussing, the benefit of putting those problem behaviors on extinction is then we're able to reinforce and give the individual a more effective, more practical way of getting what it is they want. Because we're ultimately not just saying, oh, you cannot do that, and then not giving them something else to learn. We're saying, this is not the most efficient way for you to do it. Here's this other one, and you're going to get a lot more payoff. Because ultimately, with differential reinforcement, that's what it comes down to, getting greater payoff for doing things more appropriately while discouraging them doing so a little bit more less appropriately. So let's take an example of what this may look like. And this may be something you guys have encountered before in the past. So let's just take a look.
Chevy.
Oh, that was really good tapping my shoulder. What's up?
Do you open this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see she was on the phone. So what she had her do was to tap her on the shoulder to indicate that was the target behavior. And as soon as she did so, she got the reinforcement in the form of the attention. Okay, so that's that. Now, in order to understand how differential reinforcement works, I think it is useful to kind of take a step back and kind of look at some of the theory behind that. So that involves talking about the matching law. Very simply stated, the matching law states that the rate of behavior will match the rate of reinforcement provided. Because we can think of an individual, we can even apply this to ourselves, where in the environment and in any given moment, there are various behaviors that we can choose whether or not to engage in. Now, even with all things being equal, it doesn't mean we're going to do everything or put equal weight on any given behavior. So let's take a look at how this may be applied in our everyday lives for looking at things much more applicable to the clients. All right, a little scenario for you guys. There are two restaurants. Let's say they serve the exact same style of food. However, restaurant A, typically it takes about 20 minutes for your food to be prepared and then to serve it to you. They have about moderate portion sizes and a pretty reasonable price for what you're paying. Conversely, restaurant B takes about half an hour for them to prepare your meal. Also moderate portion sizes, but it's slightly overpriced for what you're getting. Out of all things being equal, which restaurant would you guys choose to go to? Restaurant A, right? Yeah. Yeah, and then why is that? It's because the rate of reinforcement, the things that we desire from going to a restaurant, is higher in A than it is in B. And that's exactly what the matching law describes. The rate of reinforcement matches the rate of the behavior following. So just to make this just a little bit more abstract, now we've looked at a concrete example. Back to the world of abstract. The behavior A gets the reinforcement, the payoff, 90% of the time, whereas behavior B, let's say going to restaurant B, gets payoff only 10% of the time. Well, it only makes sense that the individual is always going to choose A because they're always guaranteed to get the reinforcement, the payoff. And with differential reinforcement, we can allocate or distribute the rate of reinforcement from one behavior to the other. Yeah, what if we make asking for something politely 90% of the time getting reinforcement, whereas for the undesired behavior, them yelling it out or using profanity while they make the request, 0 to 10%, they're going to go with behavior A a lot more often. Yeah, so using the example of aggression for escape, let's say this is prior to implementing any form of intervention, leading them to have a 100% chance of being able to escape using aggression. That's the function of the behavior. But following instruction never got them to pay off. Using the proper response didn't lead them to getting what they want, i.e. escape. So if we implement differential reinforcement, place aggression on extinction, and then following instructions 100%, maybe implementing some demand fading along the way, then aggression is going to be extinct. It's no longer going to be effective at getting reinforcement, and following simple instructions well. Okay. Any questions on the matching law or DR so far before we get to two particular instances of differential reinforcement? Okay. You guys with me so far? Yeah. Yeah, and it's just looking at it at the lens of just some simple numbers. Now, there are some researchers that have these long equations for the matching law to predict behavior to a T. We don't have to worry ourselves with that. It's just about being able to think of it through the lens of differential reinforcements. We are good to move on, guys? Okay. Good. So one of the many flavors of differential reinforcement is, and this is my personal favorite, DRA, differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. So this is simply when we reinforce one behavior that we would like the individual to engage more often in, as opposed to the problem behavior. And the behaviors themselves don't have to be incompatible with one another. It's just simply listed out for the individual that the desired behavior is a lot more effective. And conversely, the undesired behavior doesn't get them what they want as readily and as efficiently. So that is DRA. A really common instance of DRA applied in our setting would be if a client shouts for attention. So what a DRA procedure would look like would be putting that shouting or the screaming on extinction and then providing high magnitude, high quality reinforcement in the form of the attention when the client raises their hands, taps the shoulder, says, hey, excuse me, all that fun stuff. And I attached the video here, so let's take a look at what this one is.
Hello. This training module will include a series of video models demonstrating differential reinforcement of alternative behavior for the function of escape.
Okay, so these are all for escape.
Show me coloring. Say break. Break. Okay, you can run your break. My turn. Thank you. Show me coloring. Break. Yes, you can have a break. Okay, my turn. Thank you. With the box where they go. Good, you can have a break.
I'm just going to fast forward to...
Okay, my turn. Break. Break. Okay, you can have a break. Okay, it's time to work. Thank you. Now we're going to sort. Match the colors. That's right. Good job. Oh, no, not one. Good job. You can have a break.
Let's take a look at one more.
Say break. Break. Okay, you can have more time. All right, my turn. Thank you. We're going to do matching. All right. Match. Good job. Good job. Let's match colors now. Match colors. Break. Okay, you got a break. Thank you.
So you see, despite the topography or the form of the break, this is a problem behavior, the aggression, the slight outburst, never led to the escape. It was only when the individual either signed break, pointed to the break card, vocalized break, that it led to them getting a break. So that is DRA in practicality. Now with DRI, this is very similar to DRA, except the target behavior is physically incompatible with the problem behavior. For instance, if somebody engages in a lot of SID behaviors related to their hands, for instance, picking with themselves, then a incompatible behavior to that would be to have their hands full with sensory items. You can't pick your skin while having your hands full with other additional items that also derive similar sensory stimulation. Yeah, and then this one is, I would say, not as tricky or unpractical to implement, but the big thing we want to stress between this and DRA is that they are incompatible. You cannot do the two things at the same time. Hey, we talked about this one before. FCT, functional communication training, as it is a antecedent strategy, it is also a form of DRA. How about that? it is where the target response is a communicative behavior. And in order to implement it, we didn't go into such lengths when we're discussing it as an antecedent strategy. But to implement it, all we have to do is find the function of the behavior. As we saw with the video, it was pertaining to escape, gaining access to the preferred activity. So we got the function, and then let's give them a way to access that function, whether it be the word, vocalizing break, pointing to a break card, signing break. As long as it leads to the same result as the problem behavior, that is a functional communicative response. That is what we want. And this is a fairly touching video of how it can be applied, not just in this setting, but in the lives of those who may use it more really. Because this guy, he's a BCBA, and he's going to share his personal experience of using this outside the context of working with clients.
Brief talk. I'm just going to throw out some very specific examples of clinical matters that were solved through the principles of behavior analysis. One of them is really dear to me. It's emotional to me because it involves my father, who passed away some years ago. So what the point of this discussion is to explain the importance of replacement communicative behaviors. So my father had a severe aneurysm, which left him immobilized, unable to talk, and basically incontinent in a hospital. Okay, so my father was in the hospital and very, very thirsty. So one of the common things when you have a trach in your throat or whatever it is, you're intubated, you're thirsty. So my father was really thirsty. This is a sensitive topic for me because it still brings back memories that give me like these visceral reactions because I loved him so much and love him now to this day. It upset me, but I realized behavioral science can fix the problem, and it did. So he's thirsty. My father, I walk in the room one day and I see his arms strapped down to the hospital bed and his legs. So he's being mechanically restrained. And I said, what's going on here? They're like, well, he keeps pushing the button and then grabbing his trach. I'm like, all right, we got to figure out what is it that he's trying to communicate? Why is he pushing the button and why is he hitting, ripping out the trach? Oh, it turns out that all I did, I started asking my father yes/no questions. I asked him to nod his head and yes or no, and I found that he's just friggin' thirsty. All he wanted was ice chips in his mouth. So the way that he would get the attention, which was in an inappropriate maladaptive way, if you think of it from behavior analysis standpoint, but he would have an inappropriate behavior which was ripping out the trach and continuing to hit the button. And their solution was to restrain his arms, which is not the way to go. What I started doing was I trained them that when he pushes the button, number one, to remove the restraints on his arms and his wrists and his legs. And number two, that when he pushes the button, he just needs someone to come and give him ice chips. It was great. I was happy to say by the end of that situation, my father then was able to communicate appropriately what he wanted, and they removed the arm and leg restraints, and it was less restrictive, and he was happier. And so were the nursing staff. The medical staff were happy that he wasn't ripping the trach out. Simple strengthening of a functionally equivalent response.
Very powerful. Yeah, as you can see, it didn't take a whole lot to be able to implement that, and it really led to helping out his father. So I always appreciate that kind of example. I have a bunch more of these. We already seen a handful of them, being able to teach a functionally communicative response of my turn, more breaks, some stuff we've discussed in the past. Maybe we can take a look at it a little bit later if there's time. Yeah, before that, let's talk about the process in which we would implement these DRA procedures, or the DR procedures rather. Yeah, same thing when it comes to delivering reinforcement It has to be immediate, and it has to be on a continuous schedule of reinforcement when it is first implemented. So if you guys recall when we were talking about generalization and acquisition phases, for the acquisition, you want to really reinforce that on every single instance to build up that behavior so then it's properly reinforced. And then once the individual has demonstrated a level of competency and mastery, then we're able to phase out a little bit of the reinforcement, putting on an intermittent schedule, so then it is able just to be simply maintained. Yeah, then when it comes to FCT, the reinforcement cannot be delivered with the problem behavior, because otherwise you may just reinforce a chain as opposed to simply, oh, if I do this, I get that. If I say I want a break, I get the break. Because if we don't allow that brief pause between the problem behavior and the proper response, they could be understanding it as, okay, first I have to engage in aggression, and then I say break, and then I get the break, as opposed to simply break leads to break. And this actually just happened earlier with Justin. Now, he also needs to work on being able to tolerate some delay. Just because he wants a song at that moment doesn't mean we can play it at that moment, especially when other clients seem to be enjoying ABBA. Yeah, I heard him screaming, so then I had him step out and calmly tell me what he wanted. Of course, he wanted more than a woman. When does he not want more than a woman? So then I had him practice deep breathing, and then he asked politely, he asked nicely, can I have more than a woman? As he pointed to my phone. And then, I reinforced by saying, thank you for asking me calmly. Let's listen to it. And then he only listened to it for 10 seconds before walking back inside the room. Same slide, but different bold. I wonder what I did there. Yes, really important to highlight the MOs in place. We certainly want to be able to capture those moments where the desire for a particular reinforcer is high. So in the case of the video we watched, escape or access to the preferred activities was incredibly reinforced. It was very highly valued. The MOs, the EOs rather, for emitting an escape response were very high. And the instructor was able to capture that and redirect it towards the proper response, either signing break, vocalizing it onto the break card, and the client demonstrated that they wanted it, so they were more willing, more motivated to ask for it appropriately. Okay. This is also really important when we're looking at the dimensions that we're able to influence to make a proper response more reinforced than the other, where we're trying to lead the individual to recognize, oh yeah, if I do this, then it's going to lead me to getting what I want, as opposed to doing this other thing, the prompt behavior. There are 4 variables we considered, and when we briefly talked about reinforcement, I think back in November, we were highlighting some of these dimensions, but I think it's useful to look at them in the context of differential reinforcement and the matching law. So rate, how often the behavior gets reinforced. I think this one's pretty straightforward. If you want attention and somebody only briefly remarks you or just turns to you, as opposed to you looking at them saying, oh, hey, yes, thank you for talking to me. What would you like? There's going to be quite a discrepancy there. They're going to do certain behaviors that lead to the much more higher payoff response than the other. Same thing with magnitude, so how big it is. Working towards, let's say, a handful of chips as opposed to the whole bag, the individual is going to go for the behavior that leads to the whole bag more often than the handful. Immediacy, how fast. If there is a delay in the response to the problem behavior, whereas they're getting what they want immediately with desired response, then they're going to do that a lot more often. Kind of looking at the restaurant example, you're going to want to go to a restaurant that takes, I would say give them 10 to 20 minutes to make the food, then one that takes over an hour. I think that is fair to say. And then the big one, effort. How hard is it for them to admit the behavior? If they have to jump through hoops and ladders in order to ask for a break, and problem behavior just leads to them having to simply bang the table or to come at you, they're still going to go for that because it's a lot less effortful. And despite, I'm not sure when was the last time any of you guys had a tantrum, but from what I remember when I was much younger, they can be pretty exhausting. And so if you're able to provide the functional communicative response of what it is they want, then they're going to most likely go for that much more readily. Like I said, you get really drained for, 10 minutes, man. That'll wear you down. Yeah, and I think I included the table. Okay, good. Yeah, just some things to consider when implementing differential reinforcement. We can think of FCT as DRA, but in the context of communication. So then we think that for DRA, is there a better way, simply put, to have this individual get what they want? And with DRI, is there something that cannot happen or coincide with the problem behavior? So that is what we're looking at for today. And for Monday, we're going to look at some different flavors of differential reinforcements. But I think this gives us a good sample to try. And like I said, my personal favorite to implement is always going to be DRA. And as we take a look at some of the other ones, you're going to see that in practicality, I think DRA is usually going to be the way to go. And by extension, FCT. Questions? Okay. Before we get to the questions, any thoughts, comments, concerns with differential reinforcement procedures? Make sense so far? Okay, you guys ready to jump into it? To the questions? Let's do it. Okay, you're working with a client who shouts, "Come here," when they want attention. So you are then told to ignore the shouting, but provide immediate attention when they tap you on the shoulder. What is this an example of? I'm hearing B. B. You guys. Yes, it's DRA. Yes, differential reinforcement. Yeah. So the yelling is placed on extinction, and then the appropriate response is reinforced. So it is B. Okay. A client hits their table to get out of a non-preferred task. You teach them to point to the break icon to get a 2-minute reprieve. What is the most critical requirement of FCT in this scenario? Is it that the client has to say break out loud while pointing? You telling the client no hitting every time they use the card? The request for break is easier than hitting table, or the icon is large and colorful?
C.
Okay. Isaiah said C. Everybody else agree? Yeah, C. Yes. It is C. A is not necessary. If a client isn't able to vocalize, if they much prefer to point as their means of communication, then yeah, by all means, we can meet them where they're at. As long as they tell us that they want a break, that's what we need. B is also not necessary because, again, this is about teaching them the proper response, not adding some small reprimand. And for D, it might make it easier, but it's not essential, like it is for C. When starting DRA or FCT, What schedule of reinforcement should you initially use for the replacement behavior? Ooh, schedule of reinforcement. We haven't talked about this one in a while. So we're looking at pure extinction, VR5, FR1, or FI12. I did briefly mention it when we were talking about it in the slide. So let's try to break these down together. Oh, I think I heard the right answer. I heard C. Let's see. It is C. Yeah, good. Yeah, extinction is not what we want to do. That means it means FR0. It means FI0. We want to reinforce it. If we're completely ignoring it, then it's not going to get reinforced. Variable ratio 5, for those of you who remember, it's when we reinforce a response on average for every 5 instances in the behavior. And fixed interval, this is when the first response after 12 minutes gets reinforced. All of these are not suitable for reinforcing a behavior we're trying to develop. The only one that makes sense is FR1, continuous. Every time they ask for a break, give them a break. Every time they ask for water, give them water. Bada bing, bada boom. A client engages in skin picking on their arms. You provide them with a bowl of small beads to sort during leisure time. Why is this DRI, differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors? It's because the client's hands are busy and they can't pick their skin. It's because their sorting is simply more fun than skin picking. The beads act as a form of sensory extinction, or sorting beads is simply a leisure skill. So remember, we're looking at why this is a DRI, incompatible behavior.
A.
Bond says A. If anybody else agrees? Let's see. It is indeed A. You cannot, as much as you may try, sort out beads and pick your skin at the same time. I mean, you just can't do it. You only have 2 hands. Maybe sorting beads is more fun. Sure. The beads don't necessarily have to act as extinction because it's not as though sensory reinforcement, largely speaking, is extinguished. Yeah, maybe sorting beads is a leisure skill for some. It might be a task for others. A is the one that makes sense here. You are implementing FCT for a client who grabs snacks from others, so we have a tangible function here. They have just learned that if you hand a snack picture, they have just learned to hand you the snack picture card. Yes. What should you do if they grab a pure snack and then hand you the card? Ooh. Should you withhold the snack and wait for a period of calm before prompting for the card again? Take the pure snack and give it to the client? Ignore the grab but then reinforce the card usage? Or give them a snack immediately after using the card? So there's some, there's some debate between A or C, it looks like. Hearing A more? Okay, let's take a look. Yes, absolutely right, yeah. Just like what I did earlier with Justin. Gotta wait for a brief moment to break the contingency or not to allow the association between, hey, I do this problem behavior, I then do something to let them know what I want, and then I get the thing I want. We don't want to create this long-winded chain. We instead want to just simply teach them, if you point to the snack or hand me the snack card, then you can get the snack. But if you try to grab your pure snack, then you gotta create a little bit of disassociation first, and then we can try again. A client paces around the room during lunchtime. You begin reinforcing the client to sit in a chair with their feet flat on the floor with a sorting activity. What is this an example of? Negative reinforcement, DRI, DRA, FCT. So to briefly cover these, negative reinforcement is essentially escape. The removal of something leads to a behavior occurring much more in the future. Differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior, where the target response physically cannot be done at the same time as the problem behavior. DRA is reinforcing one over the other, or FCT, the functional communication. Okay, I heard Jason say B. Anybody got something different? Everybody agree with B? Let's take a look. It is B. Yes. You cannot pace around the room if you're sitting down with your feet flat on the ground. Again, I invite you guys to try. I invite you guys to try to do that, and I bet you can't. Because those two behaviors are simply incompatible with one another. Good. On that note, what is the difference between DRA and DRI? Is it that DRI requires a replacement behavior to be physically possible to perform with the problem behavior, or DRI does not? DRA uses reinforcement, whereas DRI uses punishment. DRA is for communication, DRI is focused on motor skills, or DRA takes longer to implement than DRI. Differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors and differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors. That's what we're looking at. What would be the main difference between them?
A.
Okay. Ron saying A. You guys agree?
Yes.
Yes, it is A. DRA does not necessarily entail that the behaviors have to be incompatible. It's simply that DRI is emphasizing that they cannot be physically done at the same time. Differential reinforcement does not mean punishment. I mean, it's not in the name. And I don't think there will ever be such a thing as differential punishment of incompatible behaviors anytime soon. DRA and DRI can both be used for both motor and communication. And DRI does not necessarily take shorter to implement than DRA. If anything, they should take more or less the same time because it's technically the same procedure, just extinction and reinforcement. Back to our friend, the matching law. According to the matching law, if a client is finding it harder, it finds hitting their desk easier and using a complex talker hard, which variable needs to be adjusted in order to make this FCT procedure successful? Okay, I'm hearing effort on. Let's see. Seems like everybody's agreeing with A. It is. Again, imagine having to go through 2 pages, click on 3 instances of groups on one of the secret tech devices just to say, oh, I need a break. You're probably not going to want to do that if was enough to get you what you wanted. Yeah, so we certainly want to make it a lot more easier and efficient, a lot less effortful. So maybe put the break icon on the front of the home page. Maybe even make it bigger than all the other icons. We got two more. A client hits themselves to get access to a preferred magazine. You teach them to sign magazine to get it. What is this a form of? DRA? Everybody else agree? Saki, it's DRA? Yeah, okay. I'm pleasantly surprised because I thought I was going to stump you guys because this is specifically FCT, but as we highlighted, FCT is a type of DRA. Awesome. Last question. According to the matching law, if an RBT provides a very high rate of reinforcement for a new DRI behavior, what happens to the problem behavior? Thank you, Saki. Man, RBT in the making right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
A.
he likes to
Fair. Thank you, Saki. Yes, don't worry. We'll wrap up here.
This is the first day of his vacation.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Happy
No
birthday.
worries. Yes. As DRA is implemented, the problem behavior is going to get extinguished, and the incompatible with desired behavior is going to get reinforced. Okay. Yeah, that's about it, guys. Any questions before we wrap it up here? No? Makes sense? All right, we'll touch more on differential reinforcement on Monday. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good vacation.
Yeah.